have another edition of Drastic Talks, this time with Bahar Sateli, who is a manager in AI and advanced analytics at a place where I work, believe it or not, PwC. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
That's where you go. Thanks. Hey, you know, this is a really interesting topic today. We're going to be talking a lot about AI and responsible AI and what it means in commercial real estate and where it's going and who's involved and some of the watchouts and stuff like that. So super excited to dive in. But before we do, for those folks who are watching who aren't familiar with you, maybe you could just take a second and kind of give us the 35,000 feet about you.
Sure, absolutely. So as you said, I'm a manager, but I would like to think that I'm a senior data scientist and less of an administrative manager, because my life revolves around data, hands-on keyboard, product development, and basically solving problems that can be solved with advanced analytics, machine learning, and AI. My background, again, is in software engineering and computer science. I got my PhD in 2018 with a specialization in AI. That's pretty much it. Since then, I joined PwC and I handle a variety of projects from different stages, different sectors, different industries, and different levels of maturity for our client. So I work everything from a proof of concept all the way to operationalization of AI within large companies.
How many people have you met that didn't know you could do a PhD in PhD in AI? Like, does that have a PhD in AI? And people are like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Does that happen?
Technically, it falls under computer science,
yeah.
And then you focus on that specific niche where your research falls into. And in my case, it was artificial intelligence. More strictly speaking, it was natural language processing, which is teaching the computers to read and understand text.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's, I mean, for the unwashed masses such as myself, when you think about natural language processing, we're talking about CRE and we're talking about these kinds of things, voice interfaces, which are probably, you know, speaking of real estate, you know, as people start to think about connected homes and stuff, and I know we're going to talk about commercial in a second, is really becoming, you know, voice is kind of like the next, especially in this touchless post-COVID world. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. So could you do me a favor? Could you tell me a little bit about what is AI? Like, I think a lot of people confuse it for RPA maybe, or even like, oh, artificial intelligence, that's HAL, or it's a robot or whatever, right? Like they conflate all of these different technologies. So at its core, at its essence, how would you describe artificial intelligence?
We have a very standard definition for AI. So AI, first off, it's an umbrella term. It's not one technique, it's a family of techniques. AI is a family of intelligent algorithms that can sense their environment, gather some data, think about what they've gathered, infer some kind of a pattern, and then act upon those. So if there is an algorithm that can sense, say, visual, sensory, auditory, even text by reading a piece of content, that's the sensing part. The thinking part is about knowledge representation, inferencing, a lot of good machine learning algorithms that falls here, and then act upon them by giving a recommendation, by making a prediction, or potentially empower a robotic process automation. So if there's a robot that needs to automate a certain business process, and it's not deterministic in a sense that what you're trying to do is just there, you have to click a few buttons, but you have to think about the text that's captured in that box, thinking where it should go, and then click on some buttons. That's some cognitive abilities, and that's where it crosses from robotic process automation into artificial intelligence.
Right. I think it's funny, anytime there's a word robot in there, people go, oh, it's a robot, but actually RPA, robotics process automation, isn't that at all. It's more like it's code and, you know, bots and this kind of stuff. But it's always really funny when people start talking about robots. It's like, oh, I don't want any robots. No, it's not that kind of robot, man.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and we call them digital workers nowadays.
Digital workers. I like that.
Yes, it's much better than the robotic one because it has no physical presence, right?
No physical presence.
There's some mechanical parts to it.
What did you call it? Digital workers?
Yes.
Digital workers. I'm gonna use that. So let's dive in here a little bit. AI is becoming very big business, yeah. And I think PwC, which is where we work, basically estimates that artificial intelligence will account for about $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030, which is really not very far away. So as we think about real estate, commercial, residential, et cetera, how do you think that artificial intelligence kind of fits with the whole real estate game? And where do you see the power being?
If you read that report, which is also widely available on our website, it not only talks about the sheer number of potential profit and savings that you can that will basically impact our GDP, but it breaks it down by different aspects of businesses that will be touched by AI. So we have things like process efficiency, which is helping businesses cut costs in a lot of processes that are typically, I would say, mundane and repetitive. So a lot of man hours are wasted on those that can be automated. But also under other things, such as connecting the information to make better decisions, decisions that are data-driven or backed by facts and numbers, as well as understanding your customers better so you can provide some personalized services and products that would drive your sale and bring the customers back to your business. And it's not exactly going to equally touch different sectors, but each sector will get affected sooner or later by some aspect of AI and automation.
Because certainly I think the notion of real estate, commercial or otherwise, is a very big industry, and it incorporates a lot of different things. I mean, when I think about real estate, just because I'm a regular residential consumer or whatever, I think about, real estate agents and buying a house and whatever. And then there's like investment properties and all this kind of stuff. But then you think about, stuff that we were talking about earlier when we weren't on the air, about supply chain and construction and all that. This is a big, big thing right now. So what's the interplay between the sort of the human aspect, the machines? How is this all fitting together? I mean, it's crazy, no?
It is. It certainly is. And it's one of the best opportunities to actually leverage data-driven decisions. The common theme here is that all of these operations, they're all very complex. There's so many players. Some are for the business, some come from their providers, people in the supply chain and logistics, manufacturing, construction businesses and all of that. There is a gap here because not all of these data are kind of connected to each other to make meaningful decisions based off of them. And traditionally, these systems used to work in silos, right? But a lot of the value that kind of the opportunity cost is that the value of that data when connected together is much more. So if you can have access and connect the synergy between your operation data versus your sales data versus your marketing data, your predictions, your financials, and all of that together, then you have a transparent 360-degree view of basically what's happening in your business real time or near real time. And that's how you can make better decisions. You can do smart pricing, you can do smart contracts, you can essentially find the bottlenecks in your processes and your operations as to streamline your business.
Amazing. So where are you seeing like the majority of effort right now being used in sort of the real estate industry? Like, is there one major focus area where a lot of organizations are putting a lot of energy and effort behind scaling? Where would that be?
Currently, I would say the most mature aspect of all of this is what we call the back office. So front office would be actual people, let's say real estate agents, and then other people who are on the front end of the whole business, and back end are people who are taking care of the operations, contracts, financials, anything else that revolves around operations. I would say the most work is done in the back office, what we call a back office transformation, is that now we're digitizing things. Now we're looking into silos of data and thinking about, is there anything that we can leverage to make better decisions, as well as digitizing a lot of operations. So a lot of our PwC surveys actually demonstrate that most people in real estate and construction game, they're a little bit behind in terms of digitization of their operations, but they're trying to catch up because there is a ton of data and there is a lot of opportunities. What they're trying to do for now is automate and digitize their operations. Through this, we're going to uncover a lot of data silos. We're going to uncover a lot of opportunities that can pave the way for bringing in machine learning, advanced analytics, and AI techniques within their operations. Are we there yet? No, but we're kind of preparing the ground for those.
Yeah, this is not one of those things that happens overnight. I mean, these things at scale not only take time, and we'll get into it in a second in terms of, you know, the responsibility and AI you can trust and all this kind of stuff, and what kind of things, how's that for a $10 word? The kinds of things that organizations really need to do, as you say, to prepare the ground for this, to go full scale. I'm really curious, you know, I work in a business that's really about people as a creative person and working in that. But it's kind of interesting when we think about AI and RPA and all this kind of stuff, about the human element as it compares or contrasts or butts heads with, you know, with the digital side of things. So that leads me to the idea about sort of bias in this whole thing. And I know you have some things to talk about bias. I think originally people might assume that better artificial intelligence, better data, all this kind of stuff is going to remove bias. What's your take on all this?
I would say that's a misconception. AI does not remove bias. The reason for this is because AI models, machine learning models, deep learning models, they learn inherent patterns in a data set that you actually use to train a model for a specific purpose. So if there are problems such as unfair bias or discrimination in the data, the model will learn those kind of hidden patterns, and the model's predictions or decisions will be implicitly affected by those. So you can't really train a model on a biased data set and expect it to act fairly. That's just not possible. So what we should do is, while we are in the process of creating an AI solution based on the data, we should do our own due diligence, do our own exploration into the data that we're actually making or basing our decision making, you know, based on. And it's one of the most trickiest part of the AI workflow, I would say, because when we're talking about, do I have an unfair data set, it basically translates to at the very end, it translates to a set of mathematical formula and everything, which is kind of hard to understand for middle managers and process owners or the CXO, right? That's the reason that we need to be cognizant and train our data scientists who are going to create these AIs, and they're going to affect masses by the predictions of these models, to be aware of these kind of complex tasks that they should take care of before they can trust the AI that they made.
That's really interesting. I mean, the simple way of explaining that's kind of garbage in, garbage out. At least that's kind of how I think about it when I think of data. But so the first step is to make sure, obviously, that you have an unbiased, clean data set. But how do you make sure that you do that? I mean, you mentioned, hey, we have to train our data scientists to do X and Y, but is that like a big leap for them, or is it kind of like a natural part of how they want to work? Is it hard to do?
So let me give you an example. If I have an AI model that's going to look at some data and make a prediction, say good or bad, that's the only two predictions that the model makes, right? So if I have 10 samples of my historical data that I showed the model, and 9 out of 10 times it was a bad outcome, when my model looks at this data set, it understands that 90% of the time, given this data, the outcome was bad. So I can just keep saying bad, 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 and 9 out of 10 times I will be right, because that's what's in the data, right? This is what we call an unbalanced data set, because you don't have enough examples of the outcome that you're trying to predict. And it could be anything. It could be during a hiring process where most of your candidates happen to be from a certain gender than the other. And if you always have a lot of examples of hiring male real estate agent rather than female, then if you use the AI model next time to predict whether you should hire this candidate versus that candidate, the candidate can just look at their genders without anything else and say, 9 out of 10 times you hired a male candidate, so let's just go for the male candidate, discounting everything else, right? So this is why it's very important. As I said, it all comes down to the numbers and statistics and simple math at times.
Right. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but I bet it's not a thing that people think about that much, because I think when you think, oh, when we have AI, sorry, I have an itchy eye. Speaking of AI, when we have AI, it's computers, man. It knows. It's omnipotent. But actually, again, we have to think about it. There's humans are creating the AI. The AI is only going to be as good as the data and all the science that you put into it, the fairness, the trust, the unbiasedness, if that's a word. Yeah, so it's like it starts with people. Yeah.
It starts with people, and AI rarely is a fully autonomous system, especially in business processes which are very, I would say, critical, or the outcome of those processes are basically predictions or recommendations that affect users, their rights and liberties in a lot of cases. You rarely have an autonomous system that just looks at data and makes a prediction and moves forward. And AI is not just one category. We have things like automated intelligence, augmented intelligence, right? So in terms of augmentation, what you're doing is really just augmenting a human decision maker with more data-driven insights rather than taking the decision itself, right? The model. So in a lot of cases, there is some extent of human agency in the process.
Right.
So you can still rely on the humans. And a simple example of that is driverless cars. Can the car drive itself? Yes. But if you read the manual, it always says you should keep your hands on the steering wheel.
Yes. Well, this is the great debate between could you and should you, right? Because there's so many things out there that we could do, automation, all these things, but I think it really depends on, whether you should do it. And I think it's a very tricky, I mean, you work in a very tricky sector, industry, in terms of, a lot could go wrong. And I think people, maybe because we've been watching too much science fiction or whatever, it could be just me, I don't know. But when we think about things being automated and intelligent, I think people go to the dark side really fast. It's, Hal from 2001, or, Mother from Aliens. You can see there's a pattern in my own movie watching. But so it's not about that. It's about making better decisions, being more predictive, being more real time, using, data. So when we think about it in terms of real estate, you talked about back office and basically automating the mundane and basically probably redeploying, smart people to different things that have greater impact. But as you think about it in terms of sort of the commercial real estate as an industry, beyond back office, where are you seeing, where would you like to see AI and a lot of this automation go? What do you think the future vision for this thing is? How's that for?
I think that's honestly, with the post-COVID or mid-COVID, I'm still not sure if the COVID is over, so we can't talk about post-COVID, but status quo tells us that the lifestyle of people is changing. Everything is increasingly becoming online and cloud-based, and all of us, we have connected devices. There's so much data that's available that talks about our availabilities and everything. And I think front office transformation should include better accessibility to the information that decision makers need to have at hand, including the end users. So let's say if I want to buy property and I need to contact a real estate agent, one of the talking about the human touches, one of the, I think, factors here is that I like to work with a real estate agent that understands me, understands my problem, understands my context. So I can find that piece of property that actually fulfills my need, right? You need to find the human, well, basically a real estate agent that can help you with that. But let's say if my profile is matched against 50 properties, is it feasible for me, especially in a competitive environment and in big cities where real estate properties are just going out fast? Do I have time? Is it feasible for me to go and physically see all of those? Probably not. But what if I had an augmented reality? What if I could see a 3D rendering of all these? Or if I could have some kind of a sorted list of property items that I might be interested at, knowing what I like, the places I've lived, my budget, all of these, I think providing real-time access to that information that makes my decision making much easier. This is something I would like to see in real estate happening.
That's pretty interesting. It makes me think about, speeding up the time from, listing to sale in a way, because there's probably some things are quite latent for many different reasons, but, having the ability to, not only search, but also prioritize based on things beyond, like, well, I don't know, I'm not talking about social sphere and stuff like that, but when all of your preferences and things start to really make a difference, it's pretty interesting in terms of, wow, how'd you do that so fast? Well, the options were good, kind of thing. Do you think that digital will ever really replace, I know we're not talking about real estate agents in particular, but where do you think humans will get to continue to play in real estate as we kind of go forward?
It actually goes back to the same discussion that we had about the human aspect of any business interaction, right? So I think the most gain is from automating repetitive tasks that will not probably bring direct value into any kind of interactions that companies have with their end users, rather than housekeeping in their data, contracts, data entry, whatever it is that they do. I think AI and automation will automate those tasks and essentially freeing up the time of human agents that are involved in this process, so they can attend to more value-added tasks. They have more time for creative thinking. They have more time in connecting with their clients, creating that human connection that actually accelerates and helps with the sale. So if you have more time to connect to your clients, if you have time to look around or understand your clients better, rather than getting stuck in an office, typing numbers and IDs into sheets, imagine how the process is going to change, and you would see the effect of that on the throughput.
Well, it's amazing to me because we work in a lot of, at least in my part of the business, we do a lot of stuff in change management. And, as new systems and new thinking and new ways of doing things comes online, the amount of resistance that people sometimes have, even though the benefit outweighs the negativity, it's really interesting. Like, have you seen, from your vantage point, a lot of resistance from people? And if so, how are you overcoming that? How did they see the future vision, go, that's the vision that I want, and I'm willing to learn or redeploy? Or they just, I want to do my own thing, my own thing?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have worked with clients where we're trying to kind of automate processes for which they had hired people who worked on the very same position, very same job, working in the same screen for 20, 25 years. Mm-hmm. So when we walked into that business property and we started talking about what we want to do and what's the roadmap and what's the outcome, I could see a lot of uncomfortable faces in the room, thinking that, oh my God, this is the only thing I have been doing the same job for 20 years. And if they're going to replace me with this machine, you're essentially stealing my job.
I don't know how to do anything else.
Right? And it all comes down to some, again, myths around AI and automation. And of course, for example, I have a technical perspective on over everything, every project, every solution that I work on, but I'm always complemented with colleagues from our kind of people and organization, what we call them. So they derive a lot of cultural changes, lots of changes in the organization when something is operationalized, and bringing that culture that we're not replacing you, we're not stealing your jobs, we're trying to streamline a lot of time-consuming tasks that you have to do day to day. So now you have more time for doing creative things because computers don't have creativity, right? So you are a human. You can think how to do things better. Where are the bottlenecks in your operations? You can think about how you can do things better or make more profit for the business instead of having to type stuff in.
Yeah. I mean, humans can't be replaced by machines for everything anyway. All you need to do is have Siri tell you a joke. Delivery is all wrong. You know?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious about something else here. Hold on. Where is it? Oh, yes. We were talking about conversational AI. Well, you were kind of intimating, I think, a little bit about conversational AI. Do you think that that's going to become more prevalent? And do you think that that's going to be reducing the amount of friction at the beginning of a process?
If properly designed, yes. And
So,
that's a big if.
okay. So how does one go about properly doing anything? How does that go?
So one thing about conversational agents or chatbots is that these chatbots have also been trained on something, right? So you have to have proper data for the chatbot to have seen certain interactions and dialogues having happened so that they can kind of replicate the same kind of naturally sounding conversations. I would say chatbots, because of the nuances in language, because language is such a complex phenomenon and it's very difficult to answer with sarcasm, with different accents, with all of those, you can't really give that decision-making power to a chatbot ever. You also have to understand where is the boundary of the extent of human agency. Where does a chatbot say, I'm not confident in my answer, so I'm just gonna stop the conversation here and connect you to Jon, right? So that the person takes it from there. There are so many examples of chatbots gone wrong. There's the very famous Microsoft one on Twitter that kind of had a closed feedback loop. So not only it was conversing, but it was also in real time learning from the conversations that happened. And people of internet, being people of internet, they managed to teach the chatbot to become very sexist and racist, and it was such a horror story that Microsoft had to shut it down in like 16 hours since it all started, right? Was the developer responsible for this? No, it wasn't properly thought through that, hey, I'm releasing this chatbot and it's learning from its interaction. So what if it interacts with the wrong crowd?
Yeah. Just like our children. Hey, you're sort of setting it up for me right now in a good way, about laying the groundwork. So there's the Microsoft example is probably an example of what not to do. And as you think about artificial intelligence and all the other sort of automation technologies that we're talking about reaching scale, I guess, and becoming sort of more mainstream than it currently is, how do organizations need to get ready? What kind of groundwork does one need to do so that when you turn this stuff on, it doesn't blow up in your face, basically? It performs the way it's supposed to.
Essentially, the first step is to understand the risks of AI. If you get yourself familiar with the risks that it brings and not just look at the benefits that AI can potentially bring to your business, then by understanding the types of risks, you can start implementing or at least planning for some mitigation techniques. For example, at PwC, we have studied these all in depth about the kind of risks that an AI solution can affect a business or an individual or a group of people or even us as a nation. If you, let's say if the government decides to have an AI solution in production tomorrow, that's going to affect all of us, right? And when we thought about those risks, then we said, okay, what can we do about this to mitigate them? Again, the point is not to remove those risks because those are inherent. Those are in the essence of AI applications. But if you're cognizant of where these risks can happen or may arise, you can flag those early on and you can stop it in the process, right? So going back to that chatbot, they could have basically a flag that as soon as the chatbot is spitting out some words that it shouldn't, then you have a mechanism to automatically shut it down. So somebody has to have the kill switch. They didn't have a kill switch until it just blew up in the news and everything, and the word got to them and somebody went and turned it down, right? So the first step in laying the groundwork is understanding it and preparing for what to do if any of those risks happen, or if you can mitigate or prevent any of them. Who do I need within an organization? Where is the extent of accountability, right? So you can have a very good view over the entire process, and essentially you can trust the system that you put to production.
That's a lot of steps. I mean, that's probably, because it's so complex, it's probably another reason that it's not full on mainstream just yet. Speaking of which, a lot of industries have found, we are in this kind of COVID world. I don't know if we're in the middle of it or the end of it, or if this is just the beginning. Nobody knows, but it's certainly had a tremendous impact on everybody. Really big time real estate. I mean, because we all had to go home. So, it put a bigger strain, I guess, on our residences. And then, occupancy is like basically zero. People are coming back now, but like, where do you see, okay, so the question one is, do you see COVID accelerating or decelerating, or maybe it's staying the same, the scale of AI in real estate?
I wouldn't say it accelerates or decelerates. I would say people will start relying much more on it, just because, let's say, if now I know that a lot of businesses, they're not using their office space anymore, or they're using a percentage of it, right? Because of social distancing and very strict government rules. Like, for example, in many cases, you're only allowed to have 15 to 20% of your staff back based on the space that's available to you, so they can have the minimum distance, right? Mm-hmm. The question is, if this happens in a lot of instances, right, and not all the people will come and occupy those places, is there a way for us to better make use of these spaces, right? At the same time, there are people who want to use an office but necessarily don't have that space within their homes or any place that they used to go and work. Mm-hmm. So a lot of questions in my head, and I think that's something where we would go, is that how do we calculate in an optimized way to fill out all of our spaces that we have at hand, such as people are comfortable and they can get things done, if it's based on hours or days of the week, or some kind of a schedule that's constantly changing. It's flexible, so you won't assign a desk to anyone. I think the concept of assigning a desk to a person is going to be it's going to be obsolete very soon. Nobody's going to own a space in an office space. Mm-hmm. Office space is going to be assigned to people based on the availability of the space and the schedule of that person. So imagine if you had some intelligent algorithms that just round the clock look at people's schedule, look at when they come, when they leave. Their basically the time schedule versus the availability. You can make use of, you can efficiently make use of the space that you have available in your office. Mm-hmm. I see a trend of kind of permanent, well, not permanent, but temporarily assigned workspaces, not just in the building of the business that you work in, but other places that are available, co-working spaces that are available in the city, such as, if you want to get something done, there's going to be a space with some Wi-Fi and good coffee available, and that you can go and get a desk and get your job done, especially that a lot of businesses have gone paper-free.
Oh yeah.
or they use very like rarely they have to print something, or documents don't exchange hands anymore. Documents go from one inbox to another, or some Dropbox or Google Drive and everything. So everything you need to get your job done is there on the cloud.
Oh
You
yeah.
just need a desk, good coffee, and a good connection. So I
We
would
got.
see a lot of those happening.
Did you see? I don't know if you know, but PwC, we got rid of all of our printers.
Exactly.
No more
So
printers.
happy to hear about that.
No more printers, and actually no more desk phones. That was part of the COVID protocol and just getting things organized. But
I don't remember taking a call on my phone ever, unlike my landline phone at the office.
no, I had mine directly forwarded to my cell phone. Occupancy is a really interesting thing. You know, when you think about, and I love what you were saying about, wouldn't it be really neat if intelligent algorithms, or whatever you want to call them, were able to take, you know, your schedule, your biometrics, other people's schedule, biometrics, geolocation, you know, when you're optimal for a task, like all these things, to be able to fashion something that drives you to a place to work with other people at its most impactful time. Be really cool. Can we do that?
Privacy, we have
Oh
to
yeah, let's talk about
stay
privacy.
also cognizant of the ethical and data privacy implications of that. But having cleared those, I think we can do a lot more. Say if you're a small business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business owner, and then you go from one office to another looking for a co-working space, and imagine if the company who's operating those kind of have a little bit of a history or information about who you are and what your interests are. We can potentially connect people together, right? So we can also use those information to connect people, make potential business relationships and connections. If people are within the same vicinity, or they happen to visit the same office and they have the same interests, you could use that information with their consent. Mm-hmm. That's the most important part, to connect them and make meaningful connections.
Yeah, you
that
know,
would be another byfact.
Yeah, it's interesting how I was having another conversation kind of about this topic, and it was really about sort of the binary nature of, sorry, let me repeat that. The binary nature of it's either or if this, then this, and really around privacy. And is there some sort of, you know, in order to do X, to achieve X, I have to give my consent, which may or may not, you know, have privacy implications. But one of the things that this person was saying was that actually that's kind of like the old model, and there actually might be new ways of thinking that is not an either or it's like additive. It's not, you don't have to give up something to get something. In other words, what's your take on that?
If you really want to be honest here, our data have always been used for different purposes. It's just that in the few past years, with GDPR and other regulations that came into place, that kind of forced the businesses to disclose to the end users why they're collecting information, what information they're collecting, and to what purpose it's going to be used, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, in a sense, you don't have to give away your data and just give all the rights away with it and saying this, you're collecting data to help me get from A to B, if you're a GPS application or something like that. And if I don't want to give you my data, then I can't benefit from this piece of technology, right? So in a sense, you have to share your data for a purpose. What's important is that business who's using your data has to be clear and transparent about the amount and the pieces of data that they're collecting on you, the frequency, where they are storing it, what purpose. Are they going to have a secondary purpose of this data? Are they going to use my transportation data to advertise something that I never signed up for? Those are the red lines, right? So as I believe that we are sharing data every minute of our day, as long as our devices are on and connected to some internet. We are sharing data. It's just that we need to know where it goes, and basically just to get an understanding of the chain of custody of that data. And what GDPR added was the right to be forgotten. So if you want to stop using or stop a business from using your data for a specific purpose, and you make that conscious decision, then you have to be sure that they actually get rid of your data.
Yeah, I don't, maybe this is just my own bias, but I don't really think anybody ever gets rid of any data. You ever read, there's a really interesting book called Delete. You ever read that? It's I'll send you the link, but it's Dr. So-and-so, I can't remember his name, but it's really about the power, the necessary power of forgetting, and the fact that in a post-digital world, there is no forgetting. And so it has some significant ramifications on our own well-being and the way we think and the way we interact organizationally. It's very interesting. Well, I'll send you the link to that if it's of interest to you. Let me see here. I'm looking at the questions. And luckily they'll cut this for me. Yeah, I don't want to talk about the real estate agents and being replaced by robots, because that feels very Jetsons to me. Where do you think, for someone who's like interested in kind of getting into, sort of the real estate and technology side of things, like you are, where do you think people should lean in? Where would they get started? What should they focus on?
I think we live in an era where data literacy is a must for everyone. And if I want to expand on that, it doesn't mean everybody has to get a PhD in AI. Everybody has to understand everything about data science, math, statistics, and all of that. No, you just need to understand data, what it is, what could be its value when it's curated and deposited in spaces that they can be consumed by intelligent algorithms. What pieces of data are critical to retain, what each one of them mean. From your perspective in the business that you're active in, what is a good quality data? And if everybody has an understanding of those and kind of an understanding of the art of the possible is what I call it, as in what are the types of machine learning algorithms that can help me, right? They don't exactly need to know the name of the algorithm, but they can understand that AI can classify things. It can look at my transactions, say which one are fraudulent and which one are okay. It can look at my project information and tell me potentially which one is going to be delayed. It can look at the features of a specific property and predict what its value it's going to be like, right? So these are the use cases or the applications of these algorithms, but knowing this kind of art of the possible, I think we're going to get a lot more use cases that nobody has ever thought about, because people who are within the business, they know their business the best. If, for example, from PwC, when I go to my client, and I have clients across many, many sectors, every time I go to my client, I'm not a domain expert in energy or retail or transportation, right? I'm an expert in my own field. I am aware of what is the art of the possible, and I know what kind of data I would typically need to create or to train an AI model. But it's usually during the discussions about, tell me about the problems that you have. Tell me about the bottlenecks of your processes, right? That all these use cases kind of come to surface. So the more our clients and people in general know that I have this problem, what if a machine could do this and that? What if the machine could point to a certain decision for me, or show me the starting price where I could do my own investigation based off of? We're going to see a lot more awesome use cases that will come out of those, right? So I would say basic literacy in data, basic understanding of AI and machine learning is a must for everyone, because we're all of us, we're heading into that era.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned predictive a few times. Do you think that, this notion of being able to take the data and make things a bit more predictive is going to make, sort of the buying and selling of commercial real estate more attractive to people, or quicker? Or, because part of me thinks of, there's so much in real estate that's about, hedging your bets or having a gut intuition about whether something's going to make money or not make money. And I'm talking about things that are already built. And I want to talk about construction and supply chain in 1 second. How do you think it's going to impact that?
I think it's just going to give us a more awareness and kind of point to things that stand out.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if you're looking at, we have a technique called anomaly detection. So if you have a normalized set of properties within a certain range and one stands out, it takes a human person to go through a lot of documents to find that out. But if machine learning says the price that's suggested, it's really abnormal because it's outside the range versus 2,000 other items, 20,000 other items that it's in my history, then it's easy for the person to find that needle in the haystack, right? As well as it will prevent you from, say, underselling your property, knowing that what is kind of the norm given a data set, given the characteristics of the location, the building itself, the materials and all of that, or people behind it. I think it would just make a more harmonized era. But I wouldn't say prediction only is applicable to processes and sales.
Mm-hmm.
I would say prediction is also useful in a lot of other contexts. For example, if you are in asset management, in property management, you can have predictive models that can predict when you're supposed to do maintenance. So don't wait for things to break down and fix them.
Right.
Looking at your maintenance logs, looking at the age of different items, articles, machinery, whatever that you have, it can tell you, hey, you're going to need to do preventive or proactive maintenance on such and such property. You know, just knowing that the historical data suggests that it's going to break down or some parts of it.
Right. Well,
That's what we call predictive maintenance.
Yeah, I love the idea of that as well. You know, there's a really big difference between automated and predictive based on data sets. So I'll give a bad example of, you know, my smart thermostat is set to tell me to change the filters after a certain amount of runtime. It's not actually telling me whether or not the filter's actually dirty. It's just kind of, oh, there goes the alarm kind of thing, right? But the idea of the things being much more predictive and intelligent, especially when it comes to maintenance, building health, the things that are really important to people right now in this COVID time, holy moly, think about the opportunities there.
Exactly, and specifically for things that are not like inside the unit, but outside the unit. Imagine if your algorithm also had access to weather forecasts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, should we fix it now? Should we fix it in a little bit later? What day of the week is going to be the best time for us to send the maintenance crew there? All of these optimized things. But there's also one more prediction that comes to my mind, and it comes from one of the discussions that we had with our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, there are a lot of humans still involved in the process, and everybody's busy. Everybody have long hours, or, you know, everybody's job is difficult in a way. And I remember that we once with one of our clients, we talked about a prediction of burnouts in the workforce.
Oh.
So that's also another thing, right? So you look at people's kind of personal data with their content, and their work schedule, things that you know about them, and you could also predict, let's say, burnouts, or you can predict if someone's going to quit. That's a little bit more difficult, but the burnout was a specific and concrete use cases that we were looking at HR data, specifically for big organizations, to kind of give them a nudge and say, well, maybe you should take a break, or should delegate your work to someone else, or, you know, go on vacation.
Do you see that application working? Let's talk about commercial real estate for a second, because I see that working in, like, you know, organizations like our own. But I'm just kind of thinking about all of the people that are on a construction site and all the different ways, prediction and whether it's burnout. Think about the safety implications on that. If you have, you know, people who are tired, or for whatever the reason is, there's, you know, there could be, you know, issues with the build. There could be, you know, danger. Like, have you seen anything happening there in that space?
So it kind of implicitly falls under predictive maintenance. So that's less of a, let's think about their mental health, more about physical health, is that machineries that if you happen to have a piece of machinery that breaks down and injures someone or a construction worker or somebody who's on site. If you have predictive maintenance, then you will fix those machines before it becomes a bigger problem.
But I
That's
meant,
also one of the implicit things.
so if we're talking about predicting burnout, you know, with sort of desk workers, I have to think that there's an application there for people who are on a construction site based on hours and effort and energy and what's going on in their personal life. It's like, well, you know, our crane operator, you know, maybe needs to take a vacation or something, you know, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so in terms of technology, there is no obstacle to get these models trained. The problem is that the end users won't feel comfortable because they might think that they're constantly being, like they're under surveillance, right? So, or if somebody gets too smart and figure out how to fool an AI model, but by feeding it not complete data and not complete work hours and all of that, they could kind of fool the AI model. So this is actually one of the topics that I'm very passionate about, and this is the ethics of AI. I can do it. I can definitely train that model, but should I do it?
Right.
That's where it gets a very, you know, complicated debate, as in, yes, it's technologically possible, but probably it's not the best, or we're not culturally ready for this kind of applications.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely feels like quite often people are willing to take advantage of, you know, they got to game the system.
Yes.
What do we need to do culturally to kind of get to a point where that's not such a concern? Like, how do we get ready for this seemingly foregone conclusion? You know, like this future is happening and it's only going to get more.
I think it's more about upskilling and reskilling people, and bringing along that data literacy, as I said. So I don't think the business unit who's taking care of all the IT and AI and other infrastructure should be completely black box to the rest of the units and say, just give us your data and we'll make some recommendations for you, right? There should be a clear communication between why we need this data from you and what benefit it would bring for all of us. Is what we're doing essentially beneficial to basically to our business units, to our idea how the world should be, right? So as long as there is that communication and people understand why they're sharing their data and how the predictions can help them to do things better, faster, more accurate, I don't think there's going to be a lot of objections. It's just that culture, that communication has to be in place to streamline the adoption of AI.
Yeah. Well, this goes back to sort of cultural shift or cultural change. You know, I mean, as humans, we're kind of creatures of habit and we don't like things to change, even though that's the sort of the model that we live in. Nothing stays the same. So why we're so resistant, I don't know. We just have a couple minutes left, and I'm just really curious. Let's just pretend for a second that you won the lottery and you had $10 million to invest in real estate. Like, where would you put your money?
I would still go back to the idea of people are now used to work remotely. All they need for their job is available. So we're gonna need places. So I will start buying office spaces for these co-working spaces and not for long-term leases probably, because when you're locked someone into a contract, first of all, there's so many options that people don't like to be locked into long-term contracts, right? So I would provide a very flexible office space or way that people can have access to those. And I would use AI and others to kind of optimize, making sure that no room is left empty.
I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with commercial real estate kind of as people go back. I mean, the leases are long, you know, you can sublease or sublet. You know, we're talking 15, 20% of occupancy. It's very complicated, you know? I mean, even just turning back on the air conditioning systems is complicated. It's like no one had prepared for this. really.
I think we need a major shift in our attitude towards these kind of stuff. So for example, the first thing that comes to mind is if you're gonna let anybody in, how do we figure out the insurance situation?
Mm.
Right? Because people are constantly coming in, moving out, and all of that. And what happens? Like, who's responsible for that? We're not going to ask everybody to have their own insurance. So probably insurance companies have to come up with a new operating model or kind of a revenue model for these kind of situations. So I think it's not just one industry who has to change. It's a slowly coming but a very big impact that's going to touch many industries. And if most sectors that are involved do their own part and kind of get a little bit creative in terms of thinking, I think we can make a much better use of our assets, being real estate, space, or money, or time.
Yeah, I guess we're going to find out. Here's my last, well, actually, my second last question. So, diversity and inclusion is a really important topic, not only for us at PwC, but I think obviously around the world. And I think it's more prevalent and more at the front of everybody's mind than it probably ever has been. Women in tech. I mean, you're a leader in this space, and do you see, in conferences and in this industry, more women coming through? What are you seeing there as far as diversity and inclusion go?
So first of all, I don't think there's any shortage of amazing women in any sector of tech. There are so many brilliant women who are active in STEM.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem was that they never had a venue for demonstrating their abilities, right? So they didn't have the stage for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, it's not that we have now more women in college. No, there was always a lot of women in college. It's just that they have more opportunities. They get more exposure. They have social media to work on their brands. They have conferences such as Drastic as an excellent opportunity, especially for things like construction, real estate, or other sectors that don't expect a lot of female active members in it, but they get this prime opportunity to come and basically share their knowledge and demonstrate their capabilities. We need more of that. Again, I don't think we need to say, let's get more women into school. That's not the case. Let's give them more stage time and air time and let them come and talk about their expertise and their lessons learned. And not only we all collectively learn, but they also become the role model for the next generation who wants to look up to these people and kind of join the movement. I think we're not there yet. I don't think we're equal in a lot of spaces yet. I remember someone told me that she had to work twice to be equal to her male peers. And that is a problem. That is a big problem. But if you get the space, if you get the stage to talk about the things that you're really good at, I think you will find your place very, very quickly. And you won't have to work twice as hard anymore.
That's a great answer. I love it. Hey, for someone who is really interested in this topic, wants to right now find out more information, start doing research, really getting up to speed in this, where would you suggest they go?
There are plenty of resources online, but I think the best advice that I can have or give to anyone is find yourself a good mentor. There is so much information online, so much that you can quickly get confused. It can overload you with a lot of information. What you need is a mentor, someone who can hold your hand or at least point you to the right direction. If you want to learn data science, there's a tremendous amount of information online, but you don't need to learn all of those. And you need someone who can point you to where the opportunities are. You need someone who can recognize your talent and your skills and help you kind of make the most out of it.
So Bahar, thank you so much for spending the time with us and kind of really opening up the aperture on responsible AI and how it can work with commercial real estate and where some of the opportunities are and what people can be thinking about and how to get started. So thank you so much for taking the time and really sharing your story with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for reaching out.